Okay, so this course is about the healthy gut. I think gut health is one of the biggest sort of most prominent areas in nutrition and health. There's so much written about it at the moment. It's incredibly popular and interesting topic, but it is genuinely interesting. I'm somebody who debunks health myths and about diet, but I find the science around the microbiome and gut health really fascinating, and there's a huge amount of interesting work being done, about how eating for a healthier gut can sort of improve your health. I think it's fair to say. There's also actually a lot of misinformation.
yeah, there is, and lots of people selling things to try and improve your gut that might not improve your gut.
Not just a diet, but lots of companies as well. There's lots of products, and there's lots of gut health is such a huge area.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and I find it slightly tricky in that respect, because I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's also a lot of good information. So it's a really hard thing for me, as someone who's not a professional dietitian, to really sort of navigate that and work out where the good information is. Because if I read the papers, a healthy gut can cure pretty much everything and get me a cheaper mortgage and a nicer car. So I mean, how do you approach that especially when we're doing the Q&As in these courses, but also when you're working with patients clinically?
Yeah, so I guess it has having a healthier gut has been associated with around 70 different. Having an unhealthy gut, actually, a dysregulated gut microbiome, has been associated with the 70.
And as someone who writes about food and health, I would say associated with doesn't necessarily mean
So that's the thing. We don't know whether the disease or illness causes the gut to become dysregulated, or the other way around. So a dysregulated gut microbiome may cause the disease, or it might not cause anything, and it just might be something completely other that's going on but there is that association there. So
I think that's my frustration as someone who writes about this quite a lot, is that newspapers and even some scientists will say, well, we'll certainly write articles in a way that suggests that the associations are always causal, healthy
whereas
gut.
Actually it could be the fact that you're smoking, or that you're drinking absolutely loads of alcohol.
Confounding factors
absolutely, which
can,
aren't necessarily obvious, certainly not in newspaper.
I think there's a website
articles
somewhere specifically dedicated to misinformation around the microbiome, which gives out awards for these people making these causal references to associations. But that's not to say that a healthy gut's not important.
It's
the
absolutely.
Microbiome. I mean, do you want to just describe a little bit, because I'm not so sure. What do people mean when they say microbiome?
So the microbiome is I believe it's complicated. The microbiome is the gene expression of the bacteria, viruses, and fungi that are in our guts, so in our colons. The gut microbiota describes the bacteria, fungi and viruses that are in our guts, but it's basically our gut health. When you read anything that's saying gut health, they're talking about pretty much the bacteria in our colons, so in our large intestines, that do lots and lots of different things in our body, and it's a relatively new area of research. So it's probably only been in the last certainly 10 years in the sort of public arena, that we've realised just how much these bacteria do for our bodies and how important they are. We haven't got to a stage where we know what is good and what is bad, but we are starting to get those associations between what might be better and what might not be so good. At some point, hopefully relatively soon, because there's a lot of research still ongoing, we will get to a point where we can say, this is what you need to have a healthy gut. This is what, and every person is going to be slightly different, like with everything. We're not all the same. We all need something slightly different. Okay. But those bacteria have a lot of functions in our gut that are important.
So if you have even if I know what sort of bacteria I need in my gut to make me healthy. How do I get those
How do you
bacteria?
get it? How do you get
But,
it?
I mean,
So-
you know, what should I do? What do you actually do if you want to improve your gut health?
Yeah, so we know at the moment to improve gut health, the plant diversity is a big one. So as many different plant-based foods as you can get in. So again, you know, quite often I will see people who are limited to broccoli and carrots as their vegetables. So they might get 5 a day, but every single day it's broccoli and carrots, a bit of lettuce, and you know, some apples, which is better than nothing. But actually, you know, we need to be getting more variety in, because all of those different plant-based foods have different compounds in them that help to feed this bacteria that then makes it so that our guts become more healthy.
Is that fibre, or is it
Fibre,
something more than that?
fibre, yeah, fibre is amazing. We all need more fibre.
Actually, I do, right. Yeah, I've written a lot about how people should eat more fibre. I think it's kind of the forgotten one. I think people forget about fibre. You know, when I was growing up, it was a big thing about how you should eat fibre. You should lots of whole grain, lots of you know, pulses and vegetables and all sorts of different things. So that, and there was fibre diets and all sorts. It was a real sort of huge trend then, and it's kind of fallen away. It's kind of slightly boring, isn't it, eating more fibre?
Well, and also I think the fact that people are so obsessed with not having too much carbohydrate, you know, so people are worried about that, and so they don't really realise that you know, fibre is in carbohydrates, and we need that in our bodies, because otherwise everything doesn't work properly. So we definitely need that. I spend a lot of my life talking about colons and bowel movements,
and that's probably, for me, that's always been for me, that's always been why you know, I've always sort of worried about. I mean, I don't like to sort of demonise certain ingredients, so I don't like to tell people, the people eating too much fat, eat less fat. I think it's a case of bringing more stuff into your diet. But when you have a diet that's really high in fat or animal protein especially, then that's going to be low in fibre, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's
absolutely. These higher protein, low carb diets tend to then come alongside constipation and other issues, you know, bigger issues than constipation as well, so over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's perhaps one of the issues with fibre and gut health generally is that in order to talk about the benefits of it, you do have to talk about
poo.
Which isn't great for people marketing food and talking about food, you know, if you're trying to sell eating healthily, because, you know, it's always been a problem for food marketers, especially. It's you know, products marketed to help with these things has never been that popular, because it's hard to make those sort of claims on a pack about, well, it's not hard to make them, but it's just not particularly good marketing to make them. So
it's interesting, and people don't really like talking about poo, actually. Clinically, you know, I ask pretty much everybody every single time I see them what their bowel habits have been, and people find it quite embarrassing to talk about.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on from that, because I find it embarrassing to talk about. I mean, the other thing people ask, people will immediately jump to if you talk about gut health is fermented foods, and actually in probiotics and sort of probiotic type drinks, which is all about gut health.
Yeah.
Is that something people should be doing? I mean, where do you stand on?
So there are probiotics that have been proven to help in certain disease conditions. On a general day-to-day basis, there is no evidence currently to say that we should all be having a probiotic. We know that, you know, after certain illnesses, then it can help. But yeah, day-to-day, we don't need them as such.
Sort of fermented foods that people talk about gut health, people tend to go to sort of kimchi and fermented cabbages and drinks. You know,
again, I think the evidence behind them is slightly lacking, but that's not to say don't include them, because actually they're quite nice. It's just that sometimes the bacteria doesn't survive, and so so it doesn't do the same. So a probiotic, to be a probiotic, has to stay intact throughout the gut to be able to then colonize the colon. Fermented foods, that doesn't necessarily happen. Sometimes the bacteria isn't intact to be able to get there. But equally, they tend to be, you know, you think about fermented cabbage, that's still got quite a lot of fibre content in it as well. So that's going to be feeding
Yeah,
the
and
gut
that's an
microbes.
interesting one actually. Because I'm always dubious. I see a lot of products, because I know a little bit about food manufacturing. I see a lot of products that people can buy in retail, like fermented, like kimchi or fermented cabbage, kind of with gut health benefits associated with them. You won't see a claim on pack because it's not, strictly speaking, legal to make that claim. But often those products are sort of pasteurized or sterilized, which means that all the bacteria in them will have been killed, because they're not live products, because otherwise they wouldn't stay shelf stable. There are some you can buy in chilled, which I think still contain live bacteria. So, but for them, the only gut benefit, and it might be a reasonable one, is that you have a certain amount of fibre, and perhaps it's broken down slightly by the bacteria.
And it tastes different. It's a kind of different taste, which is good because it might encourage people to be eating more of it. So.
Yeah. There's a slight tangentially, there's a story about kimchi, which is obviously one of these things that people eat for gut often sort of go to for butt health. I said butt health.
Don't put that bit in.
Slightly tangentially. Tangentially, there's a story about kimchi, which is I find really interesting, which is something that people go to when they're trying to look at gut health benefits, and it's a fermented food, and it's like a cabbage, like you said. It's a fermented cabbage with sort of Korean type chili paste in there, quite strong tasting. But in Korea, it's like a national obsession. It's the sort of centre, not a centre, but it's like a real cornerstone of Korean eating. And when someone from Korea went onto the space station, they had to develop a special type of kimchi, because they thought someone from Korea could not live without kimchi. And it cost them like millions of dollars to do this. Just for this one bloke sat on the space station. Because for them it was like a Korean. It's so, and I think there's an interesting point that a lot of these fermented foods are real sort of centres of cuisine, real sort of really important culinary icons in particular cuisines, and so there must be some, it feels like there should be some sort of link, perhaps not with health, but with obviously with flavour. I think they're particularly important.
I
mean, fermented foods actually there's loads of foods that are fermented which we don't think of as being fermented, like chocolate, cheese, and those sort of things.
I don't even know that.
Which are produced by fermentation, and obviously alcohol is produced by fermentation. And so I think this idea that we've become quite obsessed in our modern cuisine of making sure everything's sterile and clean, which is obviously a good thing. Food hygiene is incredibly important, but actually live bacteria in food, I think, has always been very much part of what we've eaten in terms of, sort of fermented foods. And if there are health benefits of that, that's nice. But the main thing should be the flavour, which I think is what really drives us to eat them.
Yeah, definitely.
Complete tangent.
Yeah. Great.